Welcome back to the Lone Road iRacers podcast with me, your host, Guy Robertson. And today's our first interview with a returning guest, MJ Ward. And what you're going to see first is a little montage of MJ in action. Good morning, everybody. It's just Sunday morning here in the UK, and I've got MJ with us this week. Who, if you've listened to the audio show before, you know MJ was a sim racer and still is, but she's took those skills into the real world. So I'm going to let MJ reintroduce herself to new listeners and viewers, and then we're going to start with a Paulie car as we ended the last interview. If you don't know, her car is an MX5 and its nickname is Rosie. So over to you, MJ.
Thanks a lot, Guy. Thank you for having me back on the show. Hi, everyone. I'm Martina Ward, also known as MJ. I started sim racing back in 2020 during the pandemic and properly caught the bug. And then in 2023, I transitioned from sim racing to real world racing in the UK MX5 Cup. And Guy has been very kind, allowing me to share my journey with you on his channel. So thank you for tuning in.
You're very welcome, MJ. Anytime. So I just touched base there on our last interview where it's a bit like a Dallas scene where Rosie's in the fence, shall we say, in the tire wall, with yourself still behind the wheel. I think it was at Donnington as well, if I
That's right.
remember. Um, and we left the show where Rosie had a few bumps and bruises, and we didn't know if the car was going to be a write-off or where you what you was going to even race in the following season. So talk us through what happened.
Yeah, so the end of last year, 2023, I was completing my first season of racing. And at the very last round, the very last race, I got into a scrap fighting for, I don't know, something like 20th position. And the driver I was fighting just wouldn't concede. And he kind of ended up pushing me on the grass down the back straight at Donnington, and we both went into the barrier. I think it was at about 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
So it was a pretty rough hit. I even had a bit of air. And yeah, my poor car was battered and bruised all over. Um, Luckily, the team that I hired the car from, BS Motorsport, they pulled out all the stops, and it was touch and go whether whether they'll be able to rescue her. But they did. So within, I think it was about 6 weeks, Rosie was back up and running, and I was back behind the wheel at Donington to give it a shakedown and see if everything was running as expected and the car felt as good as ever. So yeah, I was back in it for 2024.
So looking at the start of 2024 then, so you was all set up, ready to, kind of start the season, and there was a little thing that actually went wrong with an arm.
Yeah, yeah. So with Rosie all sorted, I was eager to give it a go, but long winter break. Um, and I had a bit of a stupid little accident on my way to work. I fell off my bicycle. I broke my arm, which was supposed to heal within 6 weeks, but it turned out to be a pretty bad break. So 6 weeks became 3 months, and
Wow.
after 3 months, we realized that I actually needed surgery to put my arm back properly together. So yeah, I ended up with a 10 centimeter metal plate and 8 screws in my arm. And I had surgery beginning of April, and the first round of the MX5 Comp Championship was supposed to be the first week of May, and it was just too close. So I actually had to miss the first 2 rounds out of 7 on the calendar. But still, I guess always well that ends well. So I actually managed to get back in the car for round 3, which was 8 weeks after my surgery.
So an 80-mile-per-hour crash in Rosie, where poor Rosie took the brunt against and was fixed in a few weeks, and your good self with a fell off your bike probably thought, okay, it's just a small broken arm, it'll easily fix, and has been actually more complicated than fixing Rosie by the sounds of it.
Yeah, yeah, it was a real saga. So yeah, that kind of, I guess, put a bit of a spanner in the works. So I didn't really manage to get the start to the season that I was hoping for, missing the first 2 rounds. I managed to do a couple of track days just to see if my arm was able to handle it. To be honest, but when I actually got back for round 3 at Snetterton, all I really wanted was just to remember how to drive, to make sure that my arm can take it, that Rosie can take it, and I honestly only wanted to finish in one piece. Because basically I was back in the car for the first time racing after that incident and after the surgery, and yeah, it was a lot going on. So I guess in a way it was a couple of steps back from the progress in the previous season, but yeah, luckily it mostly went okay. So we managed to continue after that.
So we all know, from the stresses of even just a sim racing with the force feedback wheels we all use these days, that there's a lot of stress and use of your forearms and your arms, basically. So, did you have to do anything off track to try and re-strengthen yourself?
Yeah, I did. As part of like following the surgery, I had to do quite a bit of physio, and I shared with the physiotherapist that my goal is getting back into a car as soon as possible. So he actually prepared for me a program more specifically orientated towards like the stresses of driving a car without power steering. I need to add that the MX5 does not have power steering. Um, so yeah, I did specific exercises to strengthen those forearm muscles and triceps, and yeah, got something called a power bowl to do exercises. It was a very dedicated exercise, and it took a while to get back into it, and I did have a bit of pain for a while, but yeah, when the adrenaline kicks in, you just push through it.
Yeah, for sure. So, this would be your going into your second full season. So, what were your lessons learnt from season one, shall we say, that you've got in your head, that whether they were like improvement points going into the season, and season goals for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So finishing season one, I had made a bit of progress throughout the season. Like I started from the very back end of the grid and kind of slowly made my way up to the midfield. One of my biggest lessons was definitely how I utilize my time on track, because obviously in real life that is a lot more precious. You can't just jump into it anytime you want. So I had to be a lot more intentional about what I did throughout my test sessions on track. And I had basically identified like my weakest areas of driving. Specifically around precision with braking. That was a big point I wanted to improve going into season two. So before all the drama with my arm, I was really hoping I can get like consistently into the top half of the field throughout season two. Um, but like I said, it was a bit of a step back with that injury. So yeah, with the first couple of rounds, I really started like taking it easy, remembering how to be around so many cars, making sure I don't
Mm.
have PTSD from the crash at Donnington, that I can still race closely. And yeah, and just focusing on consistency and not making many mistakes. Like last year in 2023, a very big weakness were my race starts. They were costing me many positions every time. So I actually managed to sort that out, which I'm fairly happy with. The next step turned out to be turn one and lap one in general, that I wasn't pushing hard enough, which again was costing me places. So that was something I worked on throughout the season to improve. Um,
MJ, where do you think that comes from then? Because as a sim racer, and we've both been there, turn one is always a wreck fest.
yeah.
So do you think that comes from being in the sim before becoming a real life racer?
I think there might be a bit of that, yes, because like you say, in sim racing, turn one can often be carnage and you expect the worst.
Mm,
But actually, in real life, it's not that bad. At least in my series, in the 750 MX5 Cup, the driving standards are very high. People are respectful. Like, there is the occasional bad apple, but overall, I don't think I've seen a turn one incident in the whole season. Like, yeah, it happens. Someone runs out of track, has to
mm.
take to the grass or gravel, but nothing is ill intended or like someone totally missing their breaking point and like playing bowling with race cars.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I actually had to get over a little bit of um, that preconception from sim racing that turn one is gonna be bad. Most of the time, it was absolutely fine. And yeah, pretty much the rest of lap one, I guess maybe there's a little bit of sim racing in there with cold tires, like not being fully yet to their capability and taking it a little bit easier. Well, in the MX5, we basically run on road tires,
Mm,
so there's not that much tire warming to worry about. Unfortunately, in the MX5 Cup, we don't get a green flag lap, so we don't get a formation lap most of the time. We just go out from the assembly area, like straight onto the grid, and then go racing. So everything is cold, but it only takes a couple of corners to to get up to temperature, really. And yeah, that was another weakness of mine where I was probably being a little bit too tentative on lap one.
okay. So, was there any new tracks in season two then that you've not raced before, and how did you find those?
Yes, there were indeed. Actually, on a calendar of 7 rounds in 2024, there would have been 3 new tracks for me. I missed one of them because of the arm. That was Truxton, and I'm kind of gutted I missed it because I think that would have been really, really fun. Because in an MX5, you basically go 95% flat out throughout the lap. Um, but there were a couple of others later in the season that I managed to do. So we did Cadwell Park. And for those who might not be familiar, it's one of the most picturesque circuits in the UK. Also, fondly nicknamed the Mini Nürburgring because of
Mm.
its like tight twists and turns and like big elevation changes. So that was really, really fun, even though I went into it a bit terrified. And later, I think it was around 6, we also did Autumn Park, which I had been looking forward to for such a long time. It had always been one of my favorites on iRacing. Probably Autumn Park in the Radico SR8 is one of the best combos you could
Mm.
possibly do. So give that a try if you haven't. And yeah, Autumn Park, I absolutely loved that track, and it actually ended up being my best result of the season as well.
I'm jealous, definitely, of driving around Alton Park because it's one of my favourites as well. But I want to go back one to Cadwell Park. So Cadwell Park is this season brand new on iRacing. So have you driven it on the sim and compared it to real life?
I have not driven it on iRacing yet. I watched a couple of races, but haven't had a chance to try it myself yet. And from what I hear and knowing how iRacing developed their tracks, I hear it's pretty spot on.
Hmm. Well, that'll maybe something as we touch base on the next interview, just to see how realistic that is. I've seen a bit of footage where there's definitely some air, I think, around the mountain that people are getting out of the MX5. I've not driven the MX5 on there myself. I've driven the Ray FF1600, and you don't get no air, but you can tell the car is so light. Your steering is so light all of a sudden, and you're trying to get it to exit as fast as you can in a straight line, as well as come out the turn. So it's quite difficult. So in
It
real
is.
life, I can imagine the first time you take that short corner and then go up that little hill, it's because it doesn't look very wide on the sim. Never mind in real life. And I think the MX5 is probably as got some more width than the Ray 1600. So yeah, I can imagine up the hill as well on the first section of track, and even coming down it to that slow left hander.
Yeah, there is just about room for two MX5s in real life
Mm.
because I was having some battles around there. I think literally on the exit of the mountain, the right hander, my team boss had to start from the back of the grid in one of the races, and he's an alien, like proper alien in an MX5. So he was coming through from the back, and he overtook me up there. Thankfully, I saw him coming, and I did my best, like to keep the car in shape and give him space. And then later on, he actually overtook someone through the S's as well. So it is possible, but it takes a lot of bravery and commitment. And also, it takes two. So
Yes, for
people
sure.
have to be cooperative for that to work. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big difference from sim to real life. You know, as you ended last season with Rosie being damaged in the sim, the cars isn't yours. You ain't got to pay for a large bill, so you're a bit less respectful in giving space and allowing people to overtake. So I think that's a big learning and a big difference between real world and sim racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I did have quite the repair bill after Donnington last year. And I can't say that it was something consciously on my mind, because if you constantly think about that, then you won't be putting your best on track. But yeah, it definitely has an impact, and everyone around me, like most people, look after their own cars. They have to do their own repairs, pay for their own parts and all that. So yeah, people are quite respectful. There is a little bit of door banging and some paint exchanged, but nothing. Yeah, nothing too major, thankfully.
Mm. So coming back to our favourites then, Alton Park, and you were right. The the Radical SR8 round there. We've probably raced it together in a few races. Really, really good. So there's a couple of dodgy corners as well. So Deer Leap and that section always catches people out. So what's it like in real life around the dodgy corners and going through his lots and the other kind of chicanes?
So Alton Park is, I guess, it's really a driver's track. You have to be pretty precise with racing line. So when we were there, like even if you went, I don't know, half a car width over from the racing line, the grip was very low. So
Mm.
you had to be like really precise. Um, and when you are, then it really flows, and like it sets you up for the next corners. It feels great, but make a mistake and then it throws you off for so many corners. Now the MX5, obviously it's not the fastest of cars, so it doesn't feel nearly as sketchy as other things might. But still, trying to hit those like turning points, apexes exactly, it's quite exhilarating. I didn't have any like particularly scary moments. I did lose a couple of positions actually into Lodge, which, yeah, I basically just outbrake myself, had to go really, really wide, and people just threw it down the inside. Um, and I think going into Druid, so the fast double right hander, at one point I think I was just a bit too aggressive on the wheel, so the car stepped out like on the little short run before turning, and that was a bit like, ooh, that woke me up. But otherwise it's really just so much fun because you're kind of just hanging on and dancing with the car. And yeah, it's a great circuit.
I missed out on opportunity. My wife bought me a driving experience around Alton Park, and unfortunately, she was a bit ill at the time. I had to use it up, and I couldn't get back from the track. So you've got to have somebody that can drive you back in case you have any accidents or incidents and things. So I ended up kind of canning it and losing that. So yeah, I would say that's a missed opportunity. But if I get another chance, MJ, I'm definitely going to go for it.
Absolutely, you must.
I did the Silverstone experience for me 50th on the little inner track, and that was in some like a Ford 2 litre thing. That was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, if anybody's got an opportunity to go into a track experience, definitely go for it. Don't miss out on an opportunity.
100%.
So let's talk about the highs and the lows of the season then. So let's start with the lows. Apart from the arm and missing a couple.
Yeah. So thankfully there wasn't anything as extreme as the previous year with the Donnington crash. Um, it wasn't really a low, but my first race back at Snetterton, I really wanted to finish all races without like a scratch, without any incidents. Unfortunately, in one of the races, I did get into an incident. A car just got a little bit over enthusiastic and threw it down the inside at the final corner at Snetterton. I saw it from a mile away.
Mhm.
And they completely outbraked themselves. I stayed tight, kept it to the left to give them room to get out of shape and sort themselves out on the outside of the corner. But when they caught the car, they just kind of T-boned me while I was
Mm.
trying to stay inside. So that was a bit of a shame. Obviously, left a bit of dent in the car that needed fixing. But at the time, I just gave it a bit of a wiggle. It was like, yep, it's still driving straight. It's still going. I'm not stopping.
Mm.
It made really terrible noises in left-handers because of where it was rubbing, but it was fine. So that wasn't like the best start, and I was a bit upset at the end of that race. Um, so yeah, coming back into the next one, it was kind of the same thing again. Try and finish with no drama, and I was probably being a bit too tentative. But I did finish all races, started making positions. So yeah, all in all, it was all looking pretty good, like improving with every race until we got to the very last round of the season, Donington again, Donington GP. And
That track is your jinx by the sounds of
it
it.
sounds like it. And you know what? It used to be one of my favorites.
Mm. Yeah.
It used to be one of my favorites. Such a fun track to drive, but just hasn't been going very well for me. So, at Donington this year was the first proper wet race we
Mm.
had, and I have basically had no experience driving in the wet. So, I was kind of clueless. I mean, I knew the theory. Don't drive on the racing line, break off line, all of that stuff. But actually putting that in practice is very different, especially when you need to do it during a qualifying session or a race session. So going out in qualifying in the wet, I was like, right, take it like semi easy, see what's happening. And I spun twice on my first two flying laps. One time coming out of Old Hairpin, I basically just breathed at the throttle and the car just went around. And the next time was going up the hill after Starsky Bridge. Again, just a little bit, I guess, more aggressive on the throttle, and it just went. So I went mowing the grass, and that totally knocked my confidence. So the
Mm.
rest of the qualifying, I was just driving like Miss Daisy. And yeah, it ended up being my worst round of the season. I was like outside of the top 20, and really not feeling comfortable and really not enjoying it that much, to be honest. So yeah, wet conditions is definitely something I need to work on.
Mm. So that might be some iRacing sim time then in the wet at Donington in the
Yes.
MX5.
Yes. Yeah, there will be some of that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've done quite. I quite like the challenge of rain in the simulator. How realistic it is, obviously, I'll never know. I'm not going to be in a race in it. So, again, next interview, if you can spend a bit of time just to see how realistic it is, because I've seen other feedback from real world racers who kind of come onto the other way and back into iRacing, so we say, and they say it's really realistic. So it'd be good to understand, from MX5 and Donnington point of view, because the areas you came off,
Yeah.
to see what that's like. But I'm just thinking now, back in even on a dry track now, from that chicane, if you that's just before the pits, yeah, pit entrance. if you come around that chicane and you touch the curbs and you put the power on before your car's straight, or you've got a bit of oversteering on, it does spin you out in the sim from time to time. So yeah, that sounds pretty much. I know it was raining, so that would be good to get that feedback as well. How slippy is it in that section? But the other section coming up the hill, yeah, I don't think I've spun it in the wet there. I've done a few races, so who knows? It could have been a bit of oil or anything.
Yeah, I mean, with wet racing, it's also the changing conditions. How wet is it really? And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I struggled with that. Like, people keep saying you have to try things, you have to go and find the grip,
Mm,
but that is easier said than done. Again, especially when you only have 15 minutes in a session
yeah.
that's competitive with other cars around you. So yeah, I didn't feel comfortable trying that out in actual race sessions. So yeah, definitely one for a testing day or a track day if I
Mm,
can manage to time it right and it being wet.
okay. So thinking about the highlights then. So I've seen on social media a certain trophy that I can see in your background. So talk us through that, because that must have been a proud moment as well.
Well, the trophy from this year is not from on track action, so I have a little driver of the meeting that's from last year from Silverstone, and then from this year this is more of a consolation prize or a participation trophy, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
from my team. So the Unbreakable MX5 is a really really clever reference to the Unbreakable movie trilogy. So Rosie, the car, being the true unbreakable one because she's been through so much. And that car has like a 20-year racing career. So I would have felt like a complete knob if I was the one to force the car to retire from racing. And Rosie, the car that I'm driving, has actually won the Race of Remembrance outright. So it's a really, really good car in
Mm.
the right hands. Um, so yeah, she is the unbreakable one. Mr. Glass is the other character in the movie trilogy. That's clearly me um, with my brittle bones. And yeah, the last character in that trilogy is Kevin Crumb, who's got like 22 different personalities. And I do tend to be, well, emotional sometimes, depending on how a race has been. So yeah, the guys in the paddock sometimes are kind of afraid of me if it hasn't gone well because I'm angry and scary. But when it does go well, I'm like Little Miss Sunshine. So yeah, it was a really really cute and sweet gesture from them.
Well, yeah, that just shows that your pit crew and your support people really are, and yourself are really are got a good thing going there. They're supporting you. They're having a bit of a laugh with you as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's really really good.
yeah,
Now,
yeah. It's the social aspect is also such a big part of racing that if you end up in the right paddock with people that you get along with and have fun, yeah, it can be almost as important as the on track action.
mhm. So I just want to touch base then for people who didn't understand and really how you get from sim racing into real world, what you had to go through and what time you have to prepare the car, get it on the track. So just talk us through that journey again, if you can.
Yeah, certainly. So I had done about, I guess, 2 years of sim racing. I'm not amazing. Like, I always say that I'm a perfectly average racing driver. But I was really enjoying it and I wanted to push myself, see what I might be able to do in real life. So I signed up for an event, Motorsport Days, where you can go and test drive some race cars. So I drove an MX5 and a BMW 116 back to back. definitely prefer the MX5. So once I decided I want to have a go, I had to prepare for an ARDS exam. So that's basically an on track driving session where you sit with an instructor and they have to deem you safe and competent to actually go racing. And there is also a theoretical part of that exam where you have to know all the flags. And generally the rules and etiquette for driving on track. So once you have an arts license, you can go and sign up to any club level championship in the UK. There are so many options depending on what you're interested in or what your budget is. The main clubs that organize such championships are the BRSCC, and the 750 Motor Club. So they're kind of your entry level, budget friendly championships. And there are options either to buy a car and prepare it and transport it all yourself, or there are many teams that actually do arrive and drive type arrangements where the team prepares the car, brings it to the track, looks after it, and you just turn up and drive. For me, I do the latter, um, because I'm not particularly mechanically inclined. And it is also a bit of a commitment in terms of money and time and space and trailers for towing a car around, etc. So my partner also races, and he does have his own car. So I have firsthand experience of preparing and looking after your own car and doing all the transporting, and I just decided that it is not something I want to do myself for my racing. So I chose the arrive and drive um, arrangement, which has worked really well so far.
Excellent. So, any budding people who thinking of, dipping their toe in, um, as MJ's just took us through, that's kind of the steps to go through. So, good luck if you do go and have a go. I just want to touch base now. So, I remember we talked about in the last interview female competitors in season one. So, did they carry on in season two like yourself? And how many were in the season two this year?
Yeah, so this year the grid in the MX5 Cup grew considerably. So we had on average 30 cars on the grid every round. I think the highest we got to was 32 at Silverstone. So compared to the 21, 22 of last year, it was a bit of a change, and the field has also gotten much closer. There's three women, three of us who race regularly in the series. The other two have more experience than me, so they're actually doing a lot better. One of my teammates, Amy, she doesn't always do every round because of like personal circumstances and whatever, but at Alton Park she managed to get a P6 in one of the races, which was
Brilliant.
incredible. Yeah, and she got the driver of the meeting because yeah, she had such an outstanding drive after not feeling very well throughout the weekend. So
Mm.
yeah, really impressive. um, I was still really happy with my P12 at Alton Park, like just knocking on the door of the top 10. But yeah, it was really great to see her there. And actually, we had another new female joiner this season, Isabel. If you're watching, hi.
Mhm.
So Isabel's dad actually started racing last year. He was the other rookie like me with zero real world on track experience, and he really enjoyed himself. And Isabel also caught the bug. So this year she joined him on track in the championship and did a few rounds. So that was really cool to see. And it's actually not the only father daughter pairing. So the other regular competitor, Mary, her dad also races regularly, and she beats him regularly.
Bragging rights
So
within the family. That's what you want.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, and they also won their class in the Burkett race at Silverstone a couple of weeks ago, which was just incredible to see, like a bunch of MX5s actually winning their class, and Mary being one of them. So yeah, big well done to them. But yeah, we have a decent female presence. Like on one of the rounds, there were four of us out of 30 cars. So that's pretty good. I mean, better than most championship you'd see. And yeah, all of us are kind of pushing each other and encouraging each other. So it's really good to see the support, like women supporting women. And yeah, it's touching. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. So obviously, I don't think there's still any at the moment, anyway. F1 female drivers still, and I know there was a few people who were ladies who were very close at getting a drive, but for whatever reason, fell away. Um, so why do you think that is? What's stopping the likes of yourself making it to the pinnacle?
So, I mean, funding is always part of it. And although people think on the surface, like, oh, yeah, you're a woman, you should find it so much easier to find funding, that is really not the case. Um, and the other part, I guess, is to get to really, really the high levels of the sport, you have to start early.
Mm.
So when you think about your Max Verstappens and Lewis Hamiltons, like they've been in a cart pretty much since they can walk. So we need that whole ladder to be supporting women and to be encouraging for women to join. And the thing is, I guess, for little girls, coming up to like a group full of just boys and they feel out of place and they're like, oh, I don't see anyone else like me here, and like, are they all gonna laugh at me, they're gonna make fun of me or be mean to me? That can be really, really off-putting for a little girl. And really, to make it to those highest levels, you have to start early. I mean, someone like me, I started driving in my 30s. I would never catch up with someone who's been driving since they were 6 or something. There are some of those racers that have shown like real potential. A lot of them have run out of funding. Think of Abby Pulling, for example. Abby Pulling is now the current championship leader in the F1 Academy, which is fully supported by F1, dedicated to female drivers with a path to progress forward. So a few years ago, she was driving in the, I think it was British F4 Championship, and she literally ran out of funding and couldn't complete the season, even though she had really good results. So that is a struggle, and that is something that can hold people back. Luckily, she's now back into it. She still races in British F4 or GB4, I can't remember, and having won races, podiums, and she's leading the F1 Academy Championship. And recently, F1 announced that the champion in F1 Academy will get a fully funded drive for the GB3, so Formula 3 level championship, which is really, really great, because that is what someone of that capacity needs. Because going through those like final few steps, F3, F2, to possibly get into F1, that costs millions.
Mm. So I think for interested young females, girls, dads and mums who have got inspirations for their children from a UK point. I know Susie Wolf is heavily involved with some of the UK motorsport activities.
Yeah, that's right. So Susie Wolf is the managing director for the F1 Academy now. So she's running that championship, which is really great, because I don't think there's anyone better, really. Like, she's been in the driver's seat, she's been in a team director at Formula E, and she's always been a supporter of girls. But there are a few other, I guess, more grassroots kind of entry points if you want to get started. So There's the Girls on Track community, so that's supported by MSUK. They regularly organize events for girls interested both in the driving side, but also in the mechanical side or media side of motorsports. So they regularly attend races or organize webinars and training. So I definitely encourage people to look into Girls on Track and what they have available. Um, Another community which is very much focused on promoting women in motorsport is the British Women Racing Drivers Club, the BWRDC. Similarly, they also organize different events. They currently have something called Into Speed, which is introducing people with no driving experience to motorsport through hill climb events.
Okay.
So you can literally turn up with your own car and have a go. So that's pretty incredible. You should go and check that out. Um, so yeah, those are two ways to get like hands-on involved. And otherwise, just check out your local racing track. I hope that like girls, if they are interested, they're not being intimidated or put off that it's gonna be mostly boys. But if they are, there are also like more female orientated series like the Jamie Chadwick karting series run by Daytona. Um, yeah, those are the few in the UK that come to mind. And honestly, I've seen more and more popping up over the last 2-3 years. So that's really, really encouraging.
Brilliant. And what I'm going to do, listeners and viewers, I'm going to put some links to some of these sites in the comment section as well. So if anybody's interested, click the links and it'll take you to these specific female racing opportunities and, have some fun at least, because that's what it's about.
Absolutely.
Look at MJ, trophies, smiling, even though she's been, smashed a couple of cars up. Poor Rosie, and also had a recovered from a broken arm. So, finished season 2. Where did you finish in the ladder? Did you gain from season 1?
Um, I don't think it's a fair comparison because I missed too many rounds.
Uh,
So yeah, even after drop rounds, like I was too far back. Um, but yeah, I guess throughout the season, I was more consistently in the top half of the grid. I did have that P12 at Alton, which is my best finishing result so far. So yeah, there's been progress for sure, and slowly but surely moving closer to the top 10.
so, looking forward to season 3. That I know it's some time away. When does the actual season start?
So on track real world it will be around April
Yeah.
or May time. I don't even have a calendar for the MX5 Cup yet, although some of the bigger championships have released their calendars yet already.
So, what does MJ do then in the closed season?
Very good question. I'm definitely gonna try and stay involved. So for one, I'm gonna try and get back more into sim racing because I've been away from the rig for for too long, to be honest. So yeah, I'm gonna try and do some officials, some special events, try out the rain for practice, and also I wanted some real world wet practice and like race time as well. So I actually signed up to a karting series, which is another new one for me because I've done just a few arrive and drive karting sessions, but nothing proper. So I looked at my local kart track, Buckmore Park, which just happens to be one of the best kart tracks in the country, and they run something called a Pro Series. Which is basically for drivers that have kind of shown consistent pace and good times around the track. So you have to be approved to take
Mhm.
part, and somehow I got approved thanks to the lap times I had shown in practice. So yeah, there's only 4 rounds, one per month. So that's gonna keep me busy throughout the winter as well, and some practice sessions to get a little bit better in the kart. And yeah, still contemplating, I guess, what next year racing season will look like.
Okay, well, I've done karting. I used to have a kart myself.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Well, I had one, and we had another one for the kids. So we did a little bit, but there was even on a kart, the repair bills were stacking up
yeah.
pretty quick. So the steering, because again, it's no power steering, of course. The activity is really going to strengthen your forearms even more. You know, I've come off the tracks doing 2 hour endurance ones at
Wow.
PF International in the UK, and you get in your car with power steering. It's like you're turning fresh air. The
Yes.
next day, your forearms are like, and your wrists are like, what did I do?
Yeah, indeed. That's a good point actually, because the practice sessions that I had done for fun were 30 minutes, and I come away tired. This pro series at Buckmore, it's actually a 1 hour solo endurance race, so that's longer than I had ever done in the kart. And we just did the first round last week. I did come out like
Mm,
feeling like jelly, pretty much.
yeah,
But yeah, it will help with fitness for sure.
yeah, definitely. You'll get in the MX5, and it'll be like, I've got power steering, and just go for my arms. Okay. So you just mentioned there coming back and having some more time in the sim. Um, a lot's probably changed. There's been big announcements this week of new cars, new tracks as we come up to start of the season 1 2025. What you're going to race? What you're looking forward to racing? You still going to do the radicals, or you're going to try something different?
Um, I would like to try something that might be a bit more similar to the real world cars that I drive, and I'm far from driving a Radical in real life,
Mm.
so something with less power, less downforce. Yeah, I need to have a look what's around. I've been out of it for so long. What would you recommend? What's good these days?
Uh, I'm more of a formula driver. I will race the odd GT3 if it's like on Monza and things like that, because I know that track, and it's always a bit crazy. We talked earlier about turn one, and you've got the first chicane that's famous for in real world of having crashes.
Yeah.
Never mind in iRacing, where, like you said, nobody gives space. They all think they can get into there and break last minute and go straight on or career into others. So, my favourite at the moment is the FF1600 or the F4. Really good, popular series. The GT series are always busy, especially
Mm.
the IMSA classes, as you know. Um, so I personally, this week alone, raced the MX5 in the Nürburgring on the Ringmeister series. Um, my experience is just drive the car, protect the car, don't get involved in other people's crashes, and I made 10 positions just with that strategy. But it's so enjoyable. I know that track inside and out, but I jumped straight into the MX5 after probably not racing it for 6 months. And I think I had 1X and finished 10th from starting 16th or something. So it's really enjoyable. So, what would I recommend? I have no idea. There's such a suite of cars these days, and we've still got new cars coming for the next season as well. I do like the rain though. It has made it a new thing to learn, an exciting new challenge, and depending on the severity of the rain, completely different as well. So when when it was first launched, and we all in the UK anyway stayed up late waiting for it to be deployed because there was some delays. we stuck it on Brands Hatch again in the FF1600 and put it on the highest rain that you could set it to, was like monsoon, and that's a challenge. So my recommendation for yourself for driving in the rain is put it on that, and if you can get your car to stay on the track and find where the grip is, that might just transition to real life, just as a potential idea.
Yeah, definitely sounds like an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
I'm gonna experiment for sure.
Yes, and believe me, like you said earlier, you put your foot down on the gas very slightly more than you did the previous lap, and it spins. And you're like, your head scratching, thinking, really, 1-2 miles an hour, and it's spinning. But there's probably a little bit of all sorts going off. You don't really, you don't understand at the time, but you're probably a little bit on where the rubber is, and you've tried to put your foot down a bit on your back wheel that's got on the rubbered section, and yeah, there's no grip there. So those revs have eventually got to grip, and then it kicks in, and then your car's off, not straight, and off you go because it just spins you around.
Yeah.
So yeah, to be good, like we said earlier, it'd be good to get your feedback how realistic it is. So have fun with that on iRacing, because yeah, it's good. It's really good. So that'll be good. Well, MJ, have you got anything else to say to the listeners, the viewers? Anything else you want to touch base on?
I don't think so. I hope, folks, you've enjoyed some of these insights. And thanks again, Guy, for having me and giving me plenty of ideas on on what I can do throughout the winter.
Yeah, no problem. Well, MJ, all I can do is thank you again. I still want to come and do a live podcast at Donnington. A day in the life of MJ on track, and see what happens. What tribulations. I wanna see your pit crew cower because you've had a bad race and things like that. So that's still one of my things on my bucket list to do. I think just to get that real insight, listen to the car starting up, etc., etc. So that'll be good to set that up one day. But I wish you all the best for 2025 season anyway.
Thank you so much, Guy.
Well, that's the end of another podcast, our first interviewee for season 2024. I hope you enjoyed that. For our audio listeners, get yourself over to YouTube to be able to see all the footage of MJ in action, including the crash at Donnington as well. Until next week, folks, stay safe on the track. Happy iRacing.